And it's joining us now, Mike. Yeah, look, I mean, basically, it looks as though Russia has bombed a place with about several thousand refugees in it.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? And, you know, war is, as we know, brutal. But the whole idea of the Geneva Conventions is to, you know, try and minimise that brutality and protect civilians and, you know, injured troops and the prisoners of war. But what we're seeing from Russia doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. We've you know, Vladimir Putin rules in this way. This is what we've seen from the history, you know, carpet bombing in Syria, the massacres of civilians in Grozny, shooting down of civilian flights, poisoning of his opposition figures, and of course the reckless criminal weapons, chemical weapons attack that we saw on the streets of Britain. So unfortunately, it's not surprising, but hopefully he will be held to account.
I mean, on that point that it may not be surprising, isn't it to an extent a reality of war? I mean, when the norms and civilization disintegrates, it often creates the conditions both for extremist political ideologies to flourish, but often the most sickening and brutal behaviour of human beings.
War is two nations against each other, two governments, often two leaders, and civilians unfortunately are caught in the middle of that. So the whole idea of the Geneva Conventions is to try and minimise that impact on civilians. And we are seeing Vladimir Putin and the Russians unfortunately using civilians to essentially shock them into surrender, which is of course not going to work in Ukraine.
No, it's not going to work in Ukraine, and I think we could all learn a lot from the resilience and the attitude of the Ukrainian people in the face of what's been going on over there. The sad reality, though, Mike, is that this is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it?
Unfortunately, you may well be right there. You know, the Russians are relatively cornered here. Their military operation has failed. Generals are dying. Vladimir Putin is isolated. NATO is stronger than ever and united. So unfortunately, that may well lead to more atrocities and war crimes from the Russians.
You say that NATO is united, though, but is it really? I mean, we have been seeing a lot of fractures over the last few weeks in relation to further sanctions on Russia. We know that Germany is incredibly dependent. I mean, you know, there's been some information that's come out that just in the last month since the invasion, to the tunes of tens of billions of pounds, the European Union have paid to Russia. Or, you know, some people arguing that they're effectively bankrolling this invasion because of their dependence on energy. So is it really accurate to say that NATO is united on this?
Absolutely. This could have gone a very different way. We may well have not had NATO bolstering its borders as it is and supplying lethal aid to Ukraine at such high rates. Obviously, the Ukrainians want more weapons, and hopefully NATO will deliver on that.
Yeah, and of course, talk of Finland joining or trying to join ASAP, basically. Just, Mike, as your capacity as a former military and intelligence officer, I'm quite keen to pick your brains about the intelligence that Vladimir Putin received and why it may have been so way off the mark. The understanding is that he was led to believe that it would be a bit of a walkover, potentially, certainly a lot less difficult, than it's been so far. Did that come from fear or from genuinely bad intelligence?
I would suggest it's predominantly through fear. And that's what happens when you rule with an iron fist and your generals are scared of you and his inner circle are sycophants who have to say what they think he wants to hear. And that filters all the way down to, the GRU and the military analysts who unfortunately will be scared of saying the wrong thing, which is obviously played into the hands of the Ukrainians, and the Russians have been completely unequipped to conduct this invasion.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike Tapp, former military and intelligence officer. Thank you for giving us your thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, and just to emphasise again, sorry, just quickly, just if you are just joining us, absolutely appalling images and videos emerging out of what's been taking place in Ukraine there. It looks as though, it's pretty convincing evidence to say this has happened, that Russia has deliberately targeted a train station with thousands of people trying to flee the war in it, and the casualties there are going to be incredibly high.